She was the first self-tape that Jen sent us. It made its way to a Facebook post that she saw that she submitted to because a friend told her about it. We were just all blown away. Then we had her come in with Fred for a chemistry read, and it was just like, okay, I think we can really paint outside the lines.
If there's something that you want to do, you better do it today. You have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow.
I was wondering if you could start off by talking a little bit how this material came to you and what sort of first attracted you to it.
I was touring the festival circuit with my first film, my first doc, Minding the Gap, and I was at a film festival called Mountain Film Telluride, and Barry Jenkins was on the jury, and he came up to me after he gave our film an award, and he was like, "You should do fiction. I have this book," and he sent me this book by Atticus Lish called Preparation for the Next Life. I read it. I was deeply moved by it and was really inspired by the potential of turning into a feature film. And then we were looking for a writer, and I got sent Martina Mayok's plays, Cost of Living and Ironbound, and I was just blown away by her sense of specificity to characters in working class communities on the East Coast. And so we hired her, and we're off to the races.
Fred, can you talk a little bit about sort of how you got involved and what sort of attracted you to playing Skinner?
I got involved through both Bing and the novel as well. I love both of his novels. I loved Bing's first movie so much, and so we met at Winston Bakery, like maybe 2 years ago now or something. I kind of think that every character you play, there's just some calling that you have towards them. I felt really close to him in the book, and then I felt really close to Bing's work, and then once I read the screenplay, I felt this like real urge to be a part of it.
Bing, can you talk a little bit about that sort of transition from documentary to narrative, and what you sort of took from your documentary work into the narrative process?
Part of it it kind of started when we met. Like, I think a lot of what we talked about was just me kind of asking Fred about his love life, and he told me, like, I never shared any of this, stuff with people. People don't ask about this in general in like first meeting, but I think it was not to like try to dig in and try to like find stuff to use necessarily. It was just to get a sense of like, what is this experience going to be like building a story in which, for me, it's like telling stories is about asking questions, and it's about like, how do you, it's just like process of constant discovery. And so I wanted to find out like, what is that process going to be like with Fred, and did that with Sabia too, who plays Aisha. It was just a process of, constantly trying to discover.
Working, I feel like, with Bing and the second time I've worked with a documentary filmmaker who's, is a first narrative. And that was something where I feel like, it's just all these rules that people sometimes don't even know why they're following on narrative film. It's just like, you shoot it this way because you shoot it this way. And I feel like even from our first meeting, there was a sense of, we can build the process to fit what interests us in this story. And that felt unique to a filmmaker that can do documentary and narrative.
I did want to go back, and I would love to hear about casting Sabia and, finding this person to play Aisha, because it is such a crucial, it is so central, and, this is her first film.
Yeah, she was in grad school at Savannah College of Art and Design, but it was just Jen Venditti like put out in her, wide network of her mysterious ways of working. I don't know how it made its way to a Facebook post that she saw that she submitted to because a friend told her about it. She was the first self-tape that Jen sent us, and it was just, we were just all blown away. Then we had her come in with Fred for a chemistry read, and there's something special about it, and it was just like, just keep going, And they just went for 10 minutes, and they kept making choices, and they kept not only making choices, but really listening to each other and keeping up with each other, and it was just like, okay, I think we can really paint outside the lines, and that's like really exciting.
Yeah. I'd love to ask both of you in sort of different ways about your research process. Obviously, being about sort of directing the story of a Uyghur immigrant, how you sort of delved into the research to treat the story the way it deserved to be, and Fred with the idea of the military background, and how you both sort of prepped for these very nuanced portrayals.
Yeah, we've been doing some Q&As, and like you always say this stuff looking back as if you have more of a plan about it than you really do. But like in actuality, it's like I'm trying to remember what it really was like, and I think the real preparation period was you trying to just engage everything. So I was really lucky. I spoke with a lot of guys who had enlisted really young and were veterans really young, and I was able to talk to them about what bothered them in movies, what felt sort of one-sided in one note. But really, I feel like the main thing that we talked about, like the two of us, was just that this person is really young, and you do all this research so that like you're not othering them, so that you realize like all of the details that relate to anybody here are applicable to this identity that you think is outcast or far away. So we watched a lot of YouTube videos of guys that are enlisted listening to emo rock and just rocking out, and like just not, really not trying to close off any limited ideas of who this person is going to be, but also take seriously what he's trying to change in his life.
Yeah, finding these like YouTube videos of people sort of, doing like childlike things. These are children that are being sent over and, being asked to sort of serve their countries. And so the immigrant stuff, I mean, Martina and I, when we were developing the script, she is the daughter of a Polish immigrant. Her mom was a house cleaner. My mom worked in Chinese restaurants. We just talked a lot about what we saw of our moms, and not only what we saw them doing, but how we saw them trying to make meaning in their lives, and like that just didn't come easy for them.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of, location scouting, sort of creating this environment, and also, those initial scenes of meeting are so sort of have such a spark to them, and just sort of staging these like street sequences. And I was really wondering how that all came together.
I did a lot of urban exploration when we were doing soft prep. So I just would try to go into like basements and back doors and sometimes get kicked out, but just discover that like, a lot of these locations are just so unique. How do we lean into this? People are kind of wary of cameras being around and, signing documents and stuff. And so we had a really great locations person who was really persuasive, spoke Mandarin and Cantonese, and carried a lot of cash on her.
Obviously, she's not here, but I was wondering how, about like what your conversations also sort of going into it with, the way you had these sort of talks with Fred, what they were like with Sabia in terms of how she saw Aisha and how she sort of thought about the role.
We talked about her personal relationship with her religion, and then we talked about just certain facts that may or may not be true, like if she was this, like what if that, and let's try that. If this, then that. So we kind of try to just, again, in the same sort of vein of us just like not really settling on like the right answer. It's like, let's see how many truths we can discover. Yeah.
Thank you all for being
Thank
here.
you, Esther. Thanks so much for coming and staying around. Thank you.